I want to talk today about some advanced countermeasures, not terribly in-depth, but enough to maybe pique your curiosity. Have you take a look at some other sources, get some interest in these. One of them is honeypots. What are they? Essentially, closely monitored network decoys. They are made to look like a real thing. The term, of course, derives from a method of catching ants and bees and whatnot. They're there to distract your adversaries, make them think they've really gotten into your systems, or keep them occupied trying to get into something worthless. They're also handy for an early warning system. Generally, honeypots are very, very closely monitored, and seeing somebody try to exploit your honeypot, generally a good sign that they're just liable to tip over into the real part of your network. Another use for honeypots is the in-depth examination of what your adversaries are doing. How are they trying to get in? What kind of tactics are they trying to use? Researchers will set these kinds up quite often. Excuse me, I have some new tools in PowerPoint, so I'm taking a look at some. I won't throw them on you today. Some of the rules for honeypots. Security resources should not have any production or authorized activity. Literally, your honeypot is not mixed in with the rest of your system. It is totally or virtually or physically separate from your production activity. Can tend to make them expensive, or an expense that is difficult to justify, particularly when you consider what the main value of a honeypot is. And we'll get to that here in a minute. I'll mention this. Keep this in mind. They could be expensive to set up and run for a large organization. They should never affect any critical network services and applications. That should go without saying. You should just kind of like, okay, I get that, should be the case in all instances. There's where that financial portion of that comes in. It's hard to convince people that you want to spend money in something that pays off if it gets attacked. Doesn't seem to be intuitively correct for a lot of people. Of course, if you're in the business and this kind of stuff interests you, yeah, I want to do that. I want to have a honeypot up. I want to catch people. But how do you convince the vice president to pay that kind of money to maintain what is in essence a fake network or fake system? Virtualization makes that quite a bit easier to justify, fortunately. A couple of different types of production honeypots. Relatively simple. Limited information gathering. They're usually as trigger points, used as alarms. Companies, corporations will put them up. They'll look like legitimate servers. They'll look like legitimate networks. But they're there simply to make somebody think they're in there. The other ones, the research honeypots, says they're complex to deploy and maintain. Researchers, the big guys, the Kaspersky's, Semantics, Fprot, F-Secure, there's a few of them. They run complex honeypots that look like full-blown systems. And they're there to be exploited. They want the bad guys to try to get into them, because then they can use that information to develop strategies to prevent it in the future. There's some amazing honeypots out there. You got to read up if you're interested in this stuff. I think they're fascinating. I've set them up in labs on other campuses, and they're fun to set up. They're a little weird to try to test inside of a network you don't have real good control over. Nonetheless, they are fun to play with. Wikipedia has some good article on honeypots. There's a website, www.honeypots.net, got a lot of good stuff on it, and particularly the different products, many of them open source and free that you can download. How about intrusion detection systems? And these are different really from your standard antivirus or anti-malware. This is something that can actually tell when people are in the system doing stuff they shouldn't be doing. Kind of like a burglar alarm set up in a house. Somebody cracks a window or breaks a glass, boom, off it goes. And there's a couple different kinds. Host-based. Host-based is centered on individual computers and devices, and monitors inbound and outbound packets. Watches the network traffic in and out to determine whether it's malicious, possibly, or benign. They also use what's called a snapshot of your system files, and you can do it yourself. This isn't something that takes special software. What it involves is getting a hash of all of your system files. What's a hash? A number generated from a string of text. If I take this sentence right here, a number generated from a string of text, and I run it, I got an underline, and run it through a hash algorithm, I'll wind up with a number. If I change that string of text in any way, hash it again, that number's different. So by taking a hash, it's essentially a mathematical picture of my system files at any given time. I can compare those hashes every now and then and immediately know when a system file has been changed. That's the way that's done. Network-based intrusion detection systems. They'll go, obviously, at strategic points in your network where it's possible to capture as much traffic as possible. One idea is put them on the subnet where your firewalls are located. You have to be very careful, though. They're looking at all the network traffic. You could cause yourself a pretty substantial bottleneck there by putting in intrusion detection right there. Within the different host and network-based types, there's also passive intrusion detection systems. When the passive type IDS detects a breach, it logs the information, sends a signal. That's it. That's all it does. Logs the information and alerts somebody via email, via text, SMS, whatever. Doesn't do any active, make any further active attempts to stop. That's where the reactive type IDS comes in. When it detects something that might be malicious, it will automatically reset the connection or drop the packets. It might even write a new rule into the firewall via some script. Just plugs in, boom, plugs in this IP address or plugs in this port number, whatever. It just automatically does that. Now, when you're talking about a reactive IDS, now you have an intrusion prevention system. Not only does it detect some intrusion, but it now starts to try to prevent it. All right? So there's some quickies. There's some stuff about honeypots, intrusion detection systems. I invite you to go on the internet and look this stuff up. If you have the resources and the time, it might be an interesting lab to run a virtual honeypot at home. And if you can get into your wireless router or whatever you use and do some port forwarding, you might just catch some bad guys in your honeypot. But be very careful. All right? Okay. Have a good one.